I'll give you all 11 inches. The billionaire warned his virgin young wife. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories every week. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to tonight's story, to her story. It started on a night when the city did not sleep. Rain fell hard against the glass walls of the Vale Tower, the kind of storm that made even the sky look angry. Inside the penthouse, every light was on white, sterile, like a stage before judgment. Evelyn Moore stood in front of a table of polished glass. On it lay a silver pen, a wedding contract, and a man who watched her the way a judge looks at a confession. Alexander Vale, the youngest billionaire in Manhattan, had built his empire by destroying competition with a smile that never reached his eyes. Now, that same smile curved as he said, "Sign it, and do not mistake this for love." His voice was deep, unhurried, dangerous. Then he added the line that would make the internet explode later. "I will give you all 11 inches of truth, of scars, of who I really am." The words hung between them like lightning. She blinked, unsure if he was mocking her or warning her. The world outside cracked with thunder. The pen in her hand trembled. Every instinct told her to walk away. But desperation is louder than fear. 2 days earlier, she was nobody, a girl with second-hand shoes and a bookstore drowning in debt. Her mother had left her one thing. A note that said, "Keep the secret garden alive." It was not a metaphor. It was the name of their shop in Brooklyn. But the bank did not care about sentimental value. They wanted $80,000 or the keys. She had tried everything: extra shifts, online auctions, even selling her old college books. Nothing worked. So when a strange email invited her to a private interview at Vale Corp, she thought it was a mistake. She went anyway. And that was how she met him, a man in a black suit, leaning against his desk, reading her application like it was a story that ended badly. "I am not hiring you," he had said. "I am offering you a deal. Marry me for 1 year. You will save your bookstore. I will save my public image." Evelyn had laughed then, soft and nervous. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious," he replied, "and I am running out of time." He told her about a board vote, a clause in his father's will that required him to appear settled. She told him she had never even been on a real date. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, a man who owned the skyline and a woman who barely owned her next meal. Back in the penthouse, that same pen felt heavier than her entire life. The air was too still, the silence too loud. He stepped closer. The scent of rain and whiskey surrounded her. "You think this is a fairy tale?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No," she said, "but I think maybe you are the one who wants it to be." "What?" Something flickered in his eyes: surprise, maybe even fear. Then he slid the contract toward her and whispered, "Then prove it." Evelyn signed her name. The storm outside broke against the glass. A violent applause. And just like that, she became Mrs. Alexander Vale, the billionaire's wife, by contract, not by choice. As he walked away, his last words echoed like a curse and a promise all at once. "Do not fall in love with me, because I do not know what I might do if you make me feel again." That night, the city roared below, unaware that somewhere above its lights, two strangers had just agreed to destroy and save each other at the same time. And from that moment, nothing about Evelyn's life, or his, would ever be ordinary again. The next morning, the storm was gone, but the silence it left behind was louder than thunder. Evelyn woke up in a room that looked like it belonged in a magazine: marble floors, silk curtains, and a skyline that stretched beyond her dreams. She had spent her first night as Mrs. Alexander Vale, and yet, it felt like she was still trespassing in someone else's life. Her wedding band was too heavy, the kind of metal that reminded her this was a deal, not devotion. When she stepped out of the bedroom, a woman in a black uniform greeted her with a polite smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Vale. Mr. Vale asked me to give you this." She handed Evelyn a thin black folder. Inside was a printed schedule, every hour of her day planned out. 7 a.m. breakfast in the main dining room. 9 a.m. fitting with Mr. Vale's stylist. 1 p.m. etiquette lunch with Mrs. Grant. 7 p.m. dinner with Alexander Vale. At the bottom, written in sharp ink, was a note: "Follow the schedule. Do not ask questions. A.V." Evelyn stared at the paper, then laughed under her breath. Right. Not love. Just rules. The main dining room was big enough to fit her entire bookstore inside. A chandelier glittered above, and the table looked long enough for a royal feast. Alexander sat at the far end, reading the financial section of the newspaper like a man who could command gravity itself. He did not look up when she entered. "Good morning," she tried. He turned one page. "You are late. It is 7:05. He glanced at his watch. "My mornings start on time. Good-o." Her stomach tightened, but she sat down anyway. The food looked too perfect to eat: poached eggs, croissants, and coffee that smelled like confidence. He finally looked at her then, his gaze cool but assessing. "I do not tolerate drama," he said flatly. "The media will look for cracks. You will not give them any." Evelyn folded her hands. "Understood. Also," he added, "we attend a charity gala on Friday. You will wear what my assistant sends you. Smile when cameras flash. And remember," he paused, eyes hardening, "we are partners on paper, not in heart." She held his gaze and said softly, "Maybe that is the only way we both survive this." Something shifted in his expression, like she had said something he did not expect, but he hid it behind a sip of coffee. The following days blurred into a pattern of instructions and obligations. She met his stylist, who looked at her second-hand shoes like they were a crime. She learned how to stand, how to hold a wine glass, how to smile without showing nerves. Every move felt rehearsed, every word measured. But what they did not know was that Evelyn's greatest skill was not pretending it was observing. Behind the cold marble and strict rules, she began to notice cracks in Alexander's armor. The way he pressed his fingers against his temple when no one was looking. The late-night piano music, coming from the closed room on the 47th floor, the one she was forbidden to enter. The way he stood at the window every night, staring at something far beyond the city lights. One evening, after another long day of smiling for strangers, she found him there again, his reflection framed in the glass. "Why do you always look at the city like that?" she asked quietly. He did not turn around. "Because it never looks back." The answer hit her harder than she expected. "Maybe it is not supposed to," she said. "Maybe it just listens." For the first time, he looked at her, really looked. There was no arrogance in his eyes now, only exhaustion. "You think too much for someone who signed a contract," he murmured. "And you feel too much for someone who pretends not to." He turned away, but not before she saw it, a flicker of pain he could not hide. Days turned into a strange rhythm. They spoke little in public but crossed paths in small, unexpected ways. He found her in the library once, curled up with a book instead of attending another etiquette session. "You are skipping your lesson," he said. "I am learning something more useful," she replied, holding up The Secret Garden. He frowned. "That is a children's story." "Maybe, but it is about broken people learning to care again." "What?" He hesitated before saying, "And you think that applies to me?" Evelyn smiled softly. "Does it not?" He did not answer. But the next morning, she found the same book placed on her nightstand, a different edition, leather-bound and beautifully old. Inside was a single note. Page 132 read it. She opened to that page. The line read, "Where you tend a rose, a thistle cannot grow." It was strange, but it made her heart ache. At the Friday gala, New York's elite gathered under chandeliers and champagne. Every woman wore diamonds, every man wore ambition. Evelyn felt out of place, but she remembered what he had said. No cracks. Alexander arrived beside her, his hand at the small of her back, formal, steady, practiced. Flashbulbs went off like lightning. Someone whispered, "Is she his charity case or his rebellion?" Evelyn pretended not to hear, but Alexander's hand tightened slightly, protective. A man approached them, older, smug. "Vale, your wife is unexpected." Alexander smiled thinly. "That is why I married her." The man laughed, not realizing the edge in Alexander's tone. Evelyn caught the flash of pride in his eyes, brief but real. Later that night, as they left, she said softly, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not letting them eat me alive." He smirked. "You handled yourself better than most. Maybe because I am used to being underestimated." Gordy. He looked at her again longer this time, and she could swear the city lights reflected softer in his eyes. That night, when she returned to her room, she found another note on her dresser. It was written in the same sharp, elegant handwriting. "You did well, but remember this world will never be kind. Do not let it change you." She touched the paper, unsure if it was a warning or a confession. Then, From somewhere deep in the penthouse, she heard it again, the faint sound of piano keys. Slow, haunted, beautiful. Evelyn followed the sound to the edge of the forbidden door. Her hand hovered over the knob, heart pounding. Behind it was the secret he had sworn she could never see. And she was beginning to understand the truth Alexander Vale promised her might not be about business or control. It might be about a wound no one else had dared to touch. As she turned away, the music stopped, as if he knew she was there. In that silence, Evelyn whispered to herself, "Maybe I am not here to follow his rules. Maybe I am here to rewrite them." Quote, outside, lightning flashed again over New York. Not as a threat this time, but as a reminder that storms always return before the calm. And somewhere in that city of glass, two hearts that had never believed in love were beginning to learn how to feel again. The next morning, New York woke under a heavy gray sky. The storm had passed, but inside the Vale penthouse, tension hung thicker than the clouds outside. Evelyn could feel it in the silence between footsteps, in the way the staff avoided her eyes. Something had changed since the gala. Alexander Vale had not spoken to her once since that night. He had left early the next morning for meetings, returning only after midnight, his voice clipped, his expression unreadable. The only trace of him was the faint scent of whiskey in the study and the sound of that piano she was forbidden to approach. But Evelyn could not stop thinking about that door, the one on the 47th floor, the one he had written into the contract. Do not enter under any circumstances. And yet, every night she heard the melody through it, sad, trembling, unfinished. On the fourth night, she found herself standing there again. Barefoot in her robe, the city lights flickering behind her like witnesses. She pressed her palm against the cold door. "Why can I hear you but never reach you?" she whispered. The music stopped. Her breath caught. For a long moment, there was nothing, just the sound of her heartbeat and the faint hum of the city below. Then came his voice, muffled through the door. "Because some rooms should stay locked, Evelyn." She froze. He was inside. "I did not mean to. You were warned." His tone was calm, but there was something behind it, fear, maybe even pain. "I just wanted to understand you," she said softly. A pause, then the sound of the piano bench scraping against the floor. "You cannot, not yet." The door remained closed. But as she turned to leave, she heard a whisper, barely audible. "Go back to sleep. It is safer that way." The next morning, she found a new schedule waiting for her. 10 a.m. Visit the Vale Foundation Children's Center. She frowned. It was the first time he had assigned her anything outside the penthouse. A driver took her downtown, to a tall glass building marked Vale Foundation. Inside, laughter echoed through the hallways, children painting, reading, learning. It was nothing like the world Alexander lived in. "Mrs. Vale?" A woman with a warm smile approached. "I am Clara, the director. Mr. Vale asked me to show you around." "He asked for me to come here?" Evelyn asked, surprised. "Yes," Clara said. "He funds the entire center but never visits. He said it might interest you." Evelyn walked through the rooms, watching the children play. One boy, about 7, was sitting alone in a corner, building a puzzle with missing pieces. She knelt beside him. "May I help?" He shrugged. "It never fits right." She smiled gently. "Maybe you just need to turn the piece a little." She rotated it and clicked it into place. His eyes lit up. "See?" she said. "Sometimes it is not the picture that is wrong. It is just the angle." When she looked up, Clara was watching her with a thoughtful expression. "He never does that for anyone," Clara said quietly. "Alexander Vale used to sit right there years ago, before the accident." Evelyn blinked. "Accident?" Clara hesitated, then sighed. "You should ask him. It is not my story to tell." That night, Alexander returned home late. Evelyn waited for him in the library, sitting by the fire with the secret garden in her lap. When he entered, he paused. "You are still awake." "I had a question," she said, her voice steady, "about the children's center." He loosened his tie, eyes narrowing. "What about it? You built it, but you never visit. That is not your concern." "It is, if I am supposed to represent you there." He stopped in front of her, hands in his pockets. "What did Clara tell you?" "Not enough," she said. "Only that there was an accident." The air shifted. His jaw tightened. "Drop it, Evelyn." "I cannot," she said quietly. "Not when I see how much it still hurts you." His eyes flared, cold and sharp. "You think you know pain because you lost a bookstore? You know nothing." Her heart stung at the cruelty, but she did not flinch. "Maybe not, but I know what loneliness sounds like. It sounds like a piano behind a locked door. Quote, that broke something in him. His breath hitched, his posture faltered, and for a fleeting second he looked human. You are too kind for this world, he said softly. And that is going to destroy you. Or it might save you, she replied. He turned away, his voice rough. Do not try to fix me. I am not trying, she said. I am just staying. Days passed, and something subtle began to change. The staff noticed first. He stopped snapping at them. He took breakfast in the same room as her. He even smiled once faintly, but enough for everyone to see. And Evelyn started leaving small traces of warmth around the penthouse. Fresh flowers in the foyer. A sketch of the bookstore on the kitchen wall. Her laughter echoing faintly down the marble halls. One evening, he found her asleep in the library, surrounded by open books. He watched her for a long moment before pulling a blanket over her shoulders. When she stirred, he whispered, "Go back to sleep." The next morning, she woke to find a note on the table. Dinner tonight, 7 o'clock, wear something you actually like. She smiled the first real smile in days. At 7, she entered the dining room in a soft blue dress she had bought years ago. Not designer, not new, but hers. He was already waiting, a single candle flickering between them. I thought billionaires do not cook, she teased, seeing the dishes. I did not, he said. I ordered in. But I set the table. She laughed. Progress. They ate quietly for a while. Then she asked, "Why me, Alexander? Out of everyone you could have married." He leaned back, studying her. "Because you were the only one who looked at me without wanting anything." "I wanted $80,000, she reminded him. He smiled faintly. "Yes, but you never looked at me like I owed you more than that." The honesty between them hung warm and fragile. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. He hesitated. Every day, until now. Evelyn's breath caught. But before she could answer, his phone buzzed on the table. He looked down, and the softness vanished from his face. "Work?" she asked. He shook his head. "Worse. My board just leaked the contract." Her pulse stopped. "Our marriage contract?" "Yes," he said, standing. "And now, the whole city will know exactly what you are, my paid wife." He walked toward the door, fury and fear in his voice. "Stay inside. Do not talk to anyone." She called after him. "Alexander, wait." Go quote. But he was already gone, leaving her in the glow of the candlelight, a wife by paper, a partner by chance, and a woman who had just realized that the truth he warned her about was no longer behind the locked door. It was now waiting outside, ready to destroy them both. And for the first time, Evelyn was not afraid of the storm. She was ready to face it. The next 48 hours were chaos. By Monday morning, Evelyn's face was everywhere, glowing on glossy magazines, flashing on digital billboards, and plastered across gossip sites with captions that burned like acid. Bookstore girl married billionaire for money. Mrs. Vale exposed contract wife revealed. Every picture, every word, every comment twisted the truth into something ugly. Inside the penthouse, the phone would not stop ringing. Journalists camped outside the building, shouting questions into cameras. Staff whispered behind closed doors. Even the doorman avoided her eyes. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the same silver wedding band she had once thought was heavy. Now, it felt poisonous. She had not heard from Alexander since the night of the leak. He had vanished, no calls, no messages, nothing but silence. When the door finally opened 3 days later, he looked different. His suit was wrinkled, his tie gone, his eyes bloodshot. She stood up immediately. "Where have you been?" He ignored the question, setting a folder on the dresser. "Damage control." "Damage control?" she repeated, incredulous. "They called me a gold digger, Alexander. They called you a fraud, and all you can say is damage control?" He met her gaze, the exhaustion in his voice sharper than anger. "If I had not done what I did, my company would be destroyed by now. So instead, you will let them destroy me," she shot back. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of her words pressed into him. "I told you from the beginning, Evelyn, this world is cruel. It eats people alive. I am not asking you to save me," she said, her voice trembling. "I am asking you to believe me. I did not leak that contract. I would never—" "I know," he interrupted quietly. "Her heart stood. You know?" He nodded, turning away. "It was not you. It was Mason, my CFO. He has wanted my position for years. This was his chance." "Then expose him." Alexander shook his head. "It is not that simple. If I accuse him without proof, It will turn into a war. The board is already planning an emergency meeting to vote me out. I cannot afford another scandal." She stepped closer. "Then let me help." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think you can fix this with kindness and coffee?" "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "But maybe I can fix it with truth." That afternoon, while Alexander buried himself in crisis meetings, Evelyn went to the one place the media had not reached yet, the Vale Foundation. The Children's Center felt like a different world, full of light and laughter untouched by tabloids. Clara, the director, looked up in surprise when she entered. "Mrs. Vale, I did not expect—" "I am not here as Mrs. Vale," Evelyn said gently. "Just as someone who wants to keep this place safe." Clara hesitated. "We saw the news. I am sorry." Quote. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Do not be. I knew what I was signing up for. I just did not know how cruel people could be." One of the children, the little boy with the puzzle, ran up to her. "You came back," he said. She knelt down. "Of course I did." He handed her a piece of paper with uneven letters. "Thank you for fixing the picture." She looked at the paper for a long time before whispering, "Maybe that is what I have to do now, fix the picture." That night, Evelyn returned home to find the penthouse dimly lit. Alexander was standing near the window, the city lights painting harsh lines across his face. "They are voting tomorrow," he said without turning. "I might lose everything." "You will not," she said, "because you are going to tell them the truth." He gave her a weary smile. "Truth is not a strategy, Evelyn. It is a weakness." "Then let me be your weakness," she said softly. "Let me remind them who you are." Close quote. He turned finally, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What are you planning?" She held up her phone. "An interview." "Liv. I will tell them everything, the contract, the reason, all of it." His face hardened. "No. You said yourself. They already destroyed your image. What more can honesty take from us? I will not let you humiliate yourself on national television." She stepped forward, her voice rising. "It is not humiliation if it saves the truth." Quote. They stood there in silence, breathing hard, eyes locked like two storms colliding. Finally, he whispered, "You could walk away right now, Evelyn. Take the money, disappear, and no one would blame you." She looked at him, the man who had once warned her never to love him. "And leave you to drown alone? That is not who I am." The next morning, the studio lights were blinding. Cameras surrounded her. Microphones hovered in front of her face, and the host's polished smile did nothing to calm her heartbeat. Alexander sat off camera, watching from the shadows. "Mrs. Vale," the interviewer began, "the world believes your marriage was a business transaction. Was it?" Evelyn inhaled slowly. "It began as one, yes, but sometimes even a contract can teach you what love really costs." Murmurs rippled through the crew. The host leaned in. "So you admit you married him for money?" "I married him to save something that mattered to me, but I stayed because I found something that mattered more, a man who forgot how to feel, and a chance to remind him." Alexander's head dropped slightly, his jaw tightening. The interviewer smiled thinly. "That sounds romantic. But how do we know this is not just another lie?" Evelyn looked straight into the camera. "Because you can fake a signature, but not kindness. And for all his walls and warnings, Alexander Vale has more heart than any headline will ever admit." For a moment, the studio went completely silent. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single clap echoed Alexander. By the end of the day, the internet was on fire again. But this time, the narrative was different. Hashtags trended. Contract but true. Miss Val speaks truth. Love not status. Clips from the interview spread across social media, not as gossip, but as inspiration. People replayed the part where she said, "You can fake a signature, but not kindness." That night, Alexander walked into the library where she sat, exhausted but smiling. "You changed everything," he said quietly. "No," she replied, "we did." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key, the same one that opened the forbidden door on the 47th floor. "Come with me," he said. They went upstairs together. The door creaked open, revealing a dim room filled with dust, broken frames, and a piano in the corner. "This was my brother's room," he said softly. "He died in the accident that should have taken me. I locked it because I could not face the sound of it anymore." Quote. Evelyn touched the piano keys, pressing one gently. The note was soft but pure. "Then let us unlock it together," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes wet with a mixture of grief and relief. "Evelyn," she smiled. You promised me 11 inches of truth, remember? Maybe it starts here. Outside, the city pulsed with light, but inside, something even brighter began to rise forgiveness. And as Alexander sat beside her and played the first notes, the music carried through the walls, reaching every silent corner of the house that had been waiting to feel alive again. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds that had hung over the city for weeks. Inside the penthouse, the air felt lighter as if someone had finally opened a window after a long winter. Evelyn woke up to the faint sound of piano notes drifting through the hall. Not the somber tune she had heard before, but something softer, warmer, alive. She followed the sound to the 47th floor, where the once-locked door now stood open. Alexander was at the piano, still in his shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled up, fingers tracing the keys like they were fragile memories. He did not look up when she entered, but his voice was calm. "Could not sleep?" "Not really," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "You were playing." He nodded. "It helps me think." "About your brother?" A long pause. Then he said quietly, "About everything I lost, and what I almost lost again." Evelyn crossed the room and sat beside him. The morning light touched his face, making him look less like the billionaire everyone feared and more like a man who had finally stopped running. "I do not know how to thank you," he said. "You did what I never could, face the world without hiding." She smiled softly. "You told me not to change. Maybe that was your way of saying I should be brave for both of us." He gave a faint laugh. "You always twist my words into wisdom." "Maybe that is my superpower," she said. They shared a small silence, one that no longer felt heavy. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You could leave now," he said finally. "The contract, it is over. The vote is in my favor. You are free." Evelyn looked at him carefully. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" He hesitated, his fingers brushing the piano keys again. "What I want has never mattered before." "Then maybe it should," she whispered. For the first time, Alexander Vale, the man who controlled empires, had no answer. Later that afternoon, the world saw a different Alexander. Cameras caught him at the foundation again, walking hand in hand with Evelyn as children ran toward them, laughing. He bent down to pick up the same boy who had once sat alone with the broken puzzle. Reporters murmured, stunned by the change. No bodyguards, no arrogance, just a man smiling. One of them shouted, "Mr. Vale, are you still together after the scandal?" He looked directly into the camera and said, "We were never apart." Quote, the footage spread everywhere. By evening, even his harshest critics were silent. Investors returned, employees cheered, and the Vale name began to mean something new, not power, but grace. That night, as the city glowed outside, Evelyn sat in the library sketching ideas for a new sign. Alexander walked in quietly and watched her draw. "What are you working on?" "A new name," she said, turning the page toward him. "For the bookstore. I am reopening it." He smiled faintly. "The secret garden again?" "Yes," she said. "But this time not just a bookstore. A place for kids from the foundation to learn, to read, to dream. A place for broken things to grow again." He leaned closer, reading the smaller text beneath the title. "Sponsored by the Vale Foundation, where stories begin again." "You really think people deserve that many second chances?" he asked. She looked at him with quiet conviction. "Everyone does, even billionaires with too many walls." As days passed, their rhythm became something natural. Breakfasts without tension. Evening walks through Central Park without cameras. The city no longer felt like a cage. But one evening, as they returned home, a black car waited outside the tower. Mason, the CFO who had betrayed him, stepped out. His face was pale, his smile forced. "Alexander," he greeted. "You look well. I did not expect to see you again," Alexander said, voice like ice. "I came to apologize," Mason said quickly. "I was wrong. The board turned on me. I lost everything." Evelyn glanced at Alexander, unsure how he would respond. The old version of him would have crushed the man without hesitation. But this time, he just looked tired. "Leave, Mason," Alexander said. "You already took enough." "Please," Mason said, his voice cracking. "I have a family, a daughter. I cannot start over." Evelyn stepped forward. "Then you understand how it feels to lose everything." Mason's eyes flickered with shame. "I do." She looked at Alexander. "Maybe it is time to end this the right way." He stared at her, then at Mason. Slowly, he nodded. "The foundation always needs accountants. Clara will call you tomorrow." Mason blinked. "You are giving me a job?" "I am giving you a chance," Alexander said. Do not waste it. As Mason drove away, Evelyn whispered, "That was not the man I met months ago." Alexander looked at her, the faintest smile tugging his lips. "No, that man died with my brother. You brought back the one who could forgive." Weeks later, the secret garden reopened in Brooklyn. The shelves smelled of new books and old dreams. Children from the foundation filled the space with laughter. Evelyn stood by the counter, arranging a vase of roses. Alexander arrived quietly, watching her from the doorway. He looked almost ordinary white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a small smile playing at his lips. "Busy?" he asked. "Always," she said. "But it is the good kind of busy." He held out a small envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a deed, transferring half of the secret garden to her name. Her eyes widened. "Alexander, I cannot." "You can," he interrupted. "It was your dream before it was ever mine." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "You keep giving me everything." He stepped closer, his voice low. "No, Evelyn. You gave me everything: first truth, courage, a reason to live again." She smiled through the tears. "So what happens now?" He took her hand. "Now we stop pretending." That evening, they stood on the penthouse balcony as the city stretched below, glowing in gold and silver. The piano music played again, this time through open windows, carrying warmth instead of sorrow. Evelyn leaned against the railing. "Remember when you told me not to fall in love with you?" "I remember," he said, eyes soft. "And you said you did not know what you might do if I made you feel again." He turned toward her, a small, genuine smile curving his lips. "I think I finally know." Quote. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same silver key, the one that once symbolized all his walls. "This," he said, placing it in her hand, "is not for the 47th floor anymore. It is for the future, for the home we will build wherever you choose." Evelyn looked at the key, her heart full. "Then I choose here, not the city, not the building, just here, with you." He cupped her face gently. "You once said storms always come before calm. I think we have earned our calm." Quote. She smiled. "Maybe calm is just another word for love." And as the lights of New York shimmered below them, Alexander Vale, the man who once lived by contracts and conditions, kissed the woman who had rewritten every rule. The storm was finally over. The music, the city, the silence, all of it now belonged to something real. For the first time, he was not the billionaire who warned his young wife. He was the man who finally kept his promise. He gave her all 11 inches of truth, of scars, of love, and every inch of it was real. The first snow of December fell softly over New York, covering the streets like a second chance. It was the kind of morning that smelled like new beginnings: coffee, cold air, and the faint sound of piano music echoing through the Vale penthouse. Evelyn stood by the window, watching the flakes swirl through the skyline. The city always looked softer in winter, quieter, as if it too was trying to forgive itself. Behind her, Alexander's voice broke the silence. "Good morning, Mrs. Vale," he said, wrapping his arm around her waist. She smiled without turning. "I never get tired of that view." He chuckled. "The city or the snow?" "Both," she said. "But mostly the view that calls me Mrs. Vale." He kissed the top of her head and murmured, "Then you are easily pleased." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I just learned that happiness is not as complicated as people think." It had been 3 months since the secret garden reopened. The shop had become a safe haven for children, artists, and readers. Donations poured in, and volunteers filled every corner. Evelyn worked there daily, and sometimes Alexander would stop by between meetings still wearing his suit, still carrying that quiet presence that made people turn when he entered. But now, when he smiled, it reached his eyes. That morning he walked into the store carrying a large cardboard box. Evelyn looked up from the counter. "What is that?" He set it down with a grin. "Your next project." She opened it and gasped. Inside were stacks of blank notebooks, hundreds of them. "Journals?" she asked. "Not just journals," he said. "Every child who visits the shop will get one. You always said stories save people. Let us give them the pages to start their own." Evelyn's heart swelled. "You actually listened to me." He smiled softly. "You taught me how." Later that afternoon, as snow thickened outside, they closed the shop early and walked through Central Park. The world felt muffled, peaceful. Evelyn's cheeks glowed pink from the cold, and Alexander carried 2 cups of hot chocolate like a man guarding treasure. "You know," she said, kicking snow from her boots, If someone had told me a year ago that I would be walking through the park with Alexander Vale, I would have laughed. Why? He asked. Because I thought men like you only existed in headlines, powerful, untouchable, cold. He smirked. I was all of those things. Not anymore, she said. Now you are just real. He handed her a cup. I like the sound of that. They sat on a bench, overlooking the frozen lake. Evelyn took a sip and sighed. Sometimes I still wonder why you chose me. Out of all the people in this city, why the girl who sold second-hand books? Alexander stared at the snow for a moment. Because you were the only person who looked at me like I was human. Everyone else wanted something: power, money, attention. You wanted to fix a bookstore, she smiled, and ended up fixing a billionaire instead. He chuckled. I am still a work in progress. Good, she said. So am I. When they returned home, Alexander went straight to his study. Evelyn followed, curious. What are you working on now? She asked. He looked up, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. A new project, something the Foundation has never done before. He turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a proposal titled, The Vale Learning Fund Education for Every Child. She read the first few lines and covered her mouth. You are creating scholarships? For every child who comes through the secret garden, he said. Books are not enough. They deserve the chance to learn, to build something lasting. Evelyn stared at him, pride and love filling her chest. Alexander, this is incredible. He shrugged lightly. It is your idea, really. I am just giving it wings. She walked around the desk and kissed him gently. You know what that means? He smiled. That I will have to hire more staff? That you are finally the man you were always meant to be. The following week, news of the new foundation project spread across the country. Interviews flooded in. Headlines read, Alexander Vale, from tycoon to teacher of hope. But with fame came curiosity, and not everyone wanted to see him redeemed. One evening, while they were closing the bookstore, a familiar figure appeared at the door. Mason. He looked healthier, humbled, holding a folder in his hands. I came to return something, he said quietly. Alexander frowned. What is it? Mason opened the folder and handed him a document. Evidence, emails, bank statements. The board bribed a reporter to leak the contract. I did not realize how deep it went until now. Evelyn's heart sank. You mean the entire leak was planned? Mason nodded. They wanted to ruin both of you. When you forgave me, I could not carry that guilt anymore. Alexander scanned the documents, his jaw tightening. This could destroy them. Evelyn touched his arm. Or you could let it end here. He looked at her, torn. After everything they did? You already won, she said. You got your life back. Do not lose your peace trying to prove a point. He studied her face for a long moment, then slowly tore the documents in half. Mason's eyes widened. You are not using it? No, Alexander said firmly. We start over. All of us. Mason swallowed hard, then nodded. Thank you, both of you. Agwan. When he left, Evelyn turned to Alexander and whispered, You just closed the last door. He smiled faintly. And it feels good. A few nights later, the foundation held its annual gala this time, not to impress investors, but to raise money for education. Evelyn wore a simple emerald dress, and Alexander stood beside her on stage as cameras flashed. He took the microphone and looked out at the crowd. A year ago, I believed money could buy control. Now I know it cannot buy forgiveness, or peace, or love. Those are earned by action, not status. The audience fell silent. Evelyn's eyes shone with pride. And to the person who taught me that, he continued, looking at her, thank you for turning a contract into a promise, and a promise into something real. Applause thundered through the hall. When he stepped down, she met him halfway and whispered, You were perfect. He smiled. You are the reason. That night, as they drove home through the snowy streets, Alexander reached for her hand. Do you ever think about how it all began? All the time, she said, but not with regret. Every mistake led us here. He squeezed her fingers. Evelyn, I was a man made of walls. You were the storm that broke them. I did not understand love until you showed me it was not about control, it was about surrender. She looked at him softly. And now? He smiled. Now, I surrender completely. Back at the penthouse, the piano waited. He sat down and played the melody she had first heard months ago, but this time it was whole. Evelyn leaned on the piano, her eyes glistening. What changed the ending? You did, he said. You gave it meaning. Snow fell outside as the music filled the room warm, endless, alive. And in that moment, Evelyn Moore and Alexander Vale were no longer bound by contracts or circumstances. They were bound by truth, the kind measured not in inches but in every heartbeat they had left to share. Because in the city that never sleeps, they had finally found their peace. And every note of that song whispered the same truth he had promised long ago. He had given her all 11 inches of pain, of redemption, of love, and she had turned every inch into forever. Snow had melted from the city streets, leaving New York gray and restless again. The Vale Foundation's new program had officially launched, and Evelyn's bookstore had become its beating heart. Every day, buses arrived full of children from every borough. They came to read, to write, and to find the kind of quiet that only books could give. But one evening, as the lights of the secret garden flickered off and Evelyn locked the door, she saw something that made her heart tighten. A group of men in suits were waiting across the street. Their expressions were too cold to belong to customers. She turned the key faster. One of them stepped forward. "Mrs. Vale?" She froze. "Yes?" He handed her an envelope. "You have been served." The man walked away before she could ask anything. Inside the envelope was a legal notice stamped with the Vale Corp seal. Her name glared in black ink. Notice of investigation misappropriation of foundation funds. For a second, the world tilted. Then her phone buzzed. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. She answered quickly. I know, he interrupted. His voice was low and cold. They came to my office too. Alexander, I swear I have no idea. I believe you, he said. But this is serious. Someone wants to take the foundation down. Meet me at home, now. By the time she reached the penthouse, Alexander was already pacing the living room, his phone pressed to his ear. His assistant's voice echoed through the speaker. No transfers were made under your authorization, sir. But someone used your personal signature code. The money is gone, all $3 million. Evelyn's chest tightened. $3 million? Alexander ended the call, jaw clenched. They redirected it to an offshore account. The system shows my signature, which means whoever did this wants me out of my own company. Who would do that? He looked up, his eyes dark. The board. They could not destroy me with the scandal, so they are trying again. But why include me? He hesitated. Because the money was transferred from the foundation under your name. She took a step back. What? It looks like you helped me hide the funds. They are framing you, Evelyn. Her hands shook. They cannot believe that. They know me. Close. People believe what makes noise, he said grimly. And right now the noise is loud. The next morning, headlines screamed again. Vale Foundation under firewife. Implicated in missing funds. Was the billionaire's redemption just another scam? Outside, cameras lined the block. Reporters shouted questions as they tried to push through. Inside, Alexander met with lawyers, phone pressed to his ear, eyes like steel. Evelyn sat quietly in the corner, trying to stay composed. I will handle this, he said without looking up. She nodded. And if they arrest me? He froze. They will not. You do not know that. He turned to her then, his voice sharp but full of fear. I will not let them touch you. Her eyes softened. Alexander, I survived worse than bad headlines. But if you protect me by sacrificing yourself, everything we built will mean nothing. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just got you back. I cannot lose you again. She touched his face gently. Then trust me, we face this together. That night, while he spoke with investigators, Evelyn searched through the financial files. Her background in books made her patient. She knew how to find details others overlooked. Hours later, she found it. A signature mismatch. A single letter off in Alexander's name. And a timestamp from a location he could not have been. She grabbed her coat and ran to his study. I found it, she said, breathless. The transfer came from a different server. Someone forged your code. Close crane. He looked up, eyes wide. Who? She turned the laptop toward him. The name beside the digital stamp froze him in place. Mason? She whispered. Alexander's face hardened. He came back to make peace. And while I forgave him, he stole everything. The next morning, they drove to the foundation headquarters. The boardroom was full reporters, investors, cameras. Mason sat at the table, perfectly calm. Alexander entered first, his arm steady around Evelyn. He set the evidence file on the table. I am here to clear my wife's name, he said. Mason smiled thinly. You mean to save yourself? Alexander opened the file, displaying the screen captures. These are transaction records from your server, Mason. You forged my signature, used my wife's authorization, and moved the funds offshore. Laughter rippled through the room. That is a serious accusation. Evelyn stepped forward. Then explain why your system shows the transfer happened from your own IP address. The room fell silent. Alexander's voice dropped lower. You came here for forgiveness, and I gave it to you. You used it to stab me again. Mason's mask cracked. He reached for his briefcase, but 2 security officers blocked him. The chairwoman of the board stood. Mr. Vale, we will cooperate with the authorities. And Mrs. Vale, she paused, her voice softening. We owe you an apology. By evening, Mason was in custody. The missing money was recovered. The media reversed their tone almost instantly. Evelyn Vale cleared of all charges. Billionaire's wife uncovers fraud restores foundation's honor. The noise turned into applause, but for Evelyn, the victory felt heavy. She found Alexander standing alone on the penthouse balcony, staring at the skyline. You did it, he said quietly. You proved them wrong again. She shook her head. We did it. And next time, do not forgive too quickly. He smiled sadly. You keep teaching me lessons I do not deserve. Maybe that is love, she said softly. He looked at her then, really looked. Love is you walking through fire to save what is mine. She reached for his hand. It was never just yours, Alexander. It was ours. Days later, the foundation held a press conference. Cameras flashed as Alexander stepped forward, Evelyn beside him. I started this foundation to build a future, he said, but I almost destroyed it because I forgot one truth, that integrity is not a speech. It is a choice we make when no one is watching. He turned to Evelyn. And sometimes, it takes someone brave enough to remind us who we are. The crowd erupted in applause. Evelyn smiled, her hand slipping into his. That night, back at the bookstore, they lit the fireplace. Snow fell again outside the window. The shelves glowed warm in the orange light. Evelyn curled up beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. Do you ever wish we had met in an easier way? He laughed softly. No, because I might not have noticed you. She looked up at him. You would have. He brushed her hair back gently. Maybe, but not like this. Not as the woman who turned my world inside out. Magui. For a moment, they just sat there, listening to the crackle of fire and the faint hum of the city below. Then he whispered, Evelyn? Yes? Do you remember what I told you the night you signed the contract? She smiled. You said you would give me all 11 inches of truth, of scars, of who you really were. And? He asked quietly. And you did, she said. Every inch of it. He kissed her then, slow and sure, as snow fell quietly beyond the glass. The world outside would always have storms, but inside there was only warmth, the kind that could never be bought and never be faked. Because love, in the end, had rewritten every contract, every scar, every inch of their story. Spring arrived quietly in New York. The city thawed under pale sunshine, and the air carried the smell of rain and renewal. From the penthouse balcony, the skyline looked softer, as if it too was tired of pretending to be invincible. Evelyn stood barefoot by the railing, a cup of coffee in her hand, watching the streets below wake up. Behind her, Alexander's voice drifted from the kitchen. Are you spying on the city again? She smiled, just making sure it is still there. He walked toward her, handing her another cup. It always will be, especially now that you are watching it. She leaned against him. Do you ever think about how fast everything changed? He nodded. Sometimes it feels like we lived a lifetime in 1 year. A beautiful one, she said softly. But I do not want us to stop building it. He raised an eyebrow. What are you planning now? Something more permanent, she said. Something real. A few days later, the Secret Garden hosted its first reading event since the scandal. Children filled the aisles. Teachers gathered near the back, and reporters lingered outside, though this time with smiles instead of microphones. Evelyn stood at the front holding a book. Stories, she told the crowd, are proof that even broken things can grow again. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Alexander stood in the back, his expression proud but quiet, the way he always looked when he let her take the spotlight. Afterward, Clara, the foundation director, pulled Evelyn aside. You have turned this place into something magical, she said, and we are expanding. The board approved funding for 3 more centers. Evelyn's eyes widened. That is wonderful. It gets better, Clara said. They want you to lead the expansion. Evelyn hesitated. Me? Clara smiled. No one else could. What? That night, she told Alexander while they sat by the fire. They want me to take over the new centers, she said, almost shy. 3 of them in Boston, Chicago, and Seattle. He listened quietly, then asked, Would you have to move? She nodded slowly. At least for a while. I would travel a lot. He looked into the flames for a long moment. You should do it. She blinked. You think so? Of course, he said. You built all of this. You should watch it grow. Quote, But what about you? She asked. He smiled faintly. I will still be here. Waiting with bad coffee and piano music. She laughed softly, though there was a tremor in it. You make it sound easy. Because it is, he said. Love is not a chain, Evelyn. It is a promise. A week later, she boarded a flight to Boston for the first expansion meeting. Alexander stood by the gate, hands in his pockets, the same way he had looked the first day they met, serious, unreadable, but with a glimmer of something softer beneath. Try not to scare the board this time, she teased. No promises, he said, then leaned close. And do not forget to call every night. I will, she whispered. He kissed her forehead. Go build your garden. The weeks that followed were exhausting but exhilarating. Evelyn spent her days traveling between cities, visiting empty buildings that would soon become new havens for children. Every place was different, but each carried the same seed kindness. At night, she would return to hotel rooms, tired but fulfilled, and find a message waiting from him. Sometimes it was a short text, play something for me tonight. Sometimes it was a voice note, his piano, soft and slow. One evening, she sent him a photo of a half-painted classroom wall. He replied with one line, It is missing something. She smiled and sent back another photo, a small vase of roses by the window. He answered, perfect. Even across miles, they were still in rhythm. But love has its tests, even in peace. One rainy night in Chicago, Evelyn was finalizing reports when her phone rang. It was Clara's number, but the voice on the other end was not hers. Mrs. Vale, the caller said. This is Street Luke's hospital. Your husband has been admitted. The words froze her. What happened? Car accident, the nurse said gently. He is stable, but you should come quickly. Quote, The next few hours were a blur of flight, a cab, a rush through the sterile hallways of a Manhattan hospital. When she reached the room, she saw him lying there, pale but conscious, a bandage above his brow. He looked up and smiled weakly. You made it fast. Do not ever scare me like that again, she whispered, gripping his hand. I was fine, he said softly. Just a few bruises. She glared. You flipped a car, Alexander. He tried to laugh but winced instead. Maybe the piano will have to wait a few days. Tears filled her eyes. You always make jokes when I am terrified. He brushed her cheek with his fingers. Because seeing you cry hurts more than any accident. Days passed in slow recovery. Evelyn stayed at his side, reading to him, working from the hospital room, and refusing to leave even when he insisted. One evening, as the sun set through the blinds, he said quietly, You should go back to your project. The children are waiting. They can wait a little longer, she said. He shook his head. You built this world so others could heal. Do not stop now just because I stumbled. She squeezed his hand. You are not a stumble. You are my reason. Quote. He smiled faintly. Then promise me something. Anything. When you finish the last center, come home not just to me, but to everything we built together. I promise, she said. 3 months later, when he was fully recovered, she returned to New York. The foundation had grown beyond what either of them dreamed. The Secret Garden bookstore now hosted weekly writing classes, and every child who once came there to escape now came to belong. On a quiet evening, they stood together outside the shop. The sign above the door glowed in golden light. The Secret Garden home of the Vale Foundation. Evelyn looked up at it, eyes shining. Home, she whispered. We really made one. Alexander smiled. Not made. Found. He pulled her close, his voice low. Do you remember what I said the night you signed the contract? She laughed softly. I will never forget it. I said I would give you all 11 inches, he said. Back then, I meant truth and scars. And now? She asked. He smiled. Now, it means every inch of the life we built, the love, the fights, the forgiveness, all of it. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Then I will take every inch again, as long as you promise to never stop playing that piano. He kissed her hair. Deal. The city glowed around them. no longer cold, no longer lonely. And as the sound of laughter and piano music drifted from the open door of the bookstore, Evelyn Moore and Alexander Vale finally understood that every storm, every wound, every inch of pain had only ever been leading them here to the quiet miracle of love that stays. Because in the end, real love is not the storm. It is the calm after. The year ended the way all great stories do, quietly, without fanfare, but with peace. Winter had returned to New York, and the snow outside looked softer this time, as if even the sky knew that some storms were not meant to destroy, but to cleanse. Evelyn stood in the bookstore's window, arranging the final display of the year. Children's drawings covered the walls, their words scrawled in bright crayon colors. "Thank you for believing in us." The scent of cinnamon tea and paper filled the room. Behind her, laughter echoed the soft, easy sound of people who had survived. Alexander watched her from the doorway. He was no longer the man who measured time in deals and deadlines. The suit had been replaced by a sweater, his phone left in another room, his expression softer than anyone in the city would believe. He walked toward her and said, "You have that look again." She smiled without turning. "What look?" "The one that says you are thinking about tomorrow even while today is still here." She laughed softly. "Maybe. I was just thinking about how everything started. One contract, one storm, one impossible man." "Impossible?" he asked, amused. "Yes," she said. "You were all walls and rules. You told me not to fall in love with you." He chuckled. "And you ignored every rule, Claude." "Some rules deserve to be broken," she said, glancing at him. "Especially the ones written by fear." He touched her hand. "Do you regret any of it?" She shook her head. "Not even the pain. Without it, we would never have known what real love feels like." He looked at her for a long moment, the corners of his lips curving upward. "I used to think love was a risk I could not afford. Now I know it is the only thing worth risking everything for." A few days later, the foundation hosted its final event of the year, a gathering for the children who had joined the scholarship program. The hall was filled with families, teachers, and laughter. Evelyn stood on stage beside Alexander, her voice steady but warm. "A year ago, this foundation was an idea. Today, it is proof that kindness can outlast every headline, every doubt, and every storm." The audience applauded. Some of the children held up their journals, the same ones Alexander had given them months before. One small girl raised her hand and asked, "Mrs. Vale, what does love mean to you?" The room went silent. Evelyn looked at Alexander, then back at the girl. "It means choosing someone, even when the world tells you it is easier to run," she said gently. "It means believing that every scar can heal if you let someone see it." The girl smiled. Alexander's gaze softened, pride shining through his usual calm. When the applause came again, it felt like closure, not an ending, but a new beginning written in light. That night, after the event, they returned to the penthouse. The city below shimmered under snow. Evelyn curled up on the couch beside Alexander, the glow of the fireplace casting gold over their faces. "Do you remember," she began, "the first night I stayed here? I was terrified. I thought you hated me." He smiled faintly. "I did not hate you. I hated myself for wanting to believe in someone again." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And now?" "Now," he said quietly, "I believe in you more than I believe in gravity." She laughed, though her eyes grew misty. "That sounds impossible." He tilted her chin up. "So did we." A soft knock interrupted them. It was Clara, holding a small brown envelope. "Sorry to intrude," she said. "This was delivered to the foundation, addressed to both of you." Evelyn took it and opened the flap. Inside was a letter, no return address, just a few words written in clean, deliberate handwriting. "For everything you built, for the lives you changed, thank you. Some debts can never be repaid, but some hearts can be set right. I am starting over, and it is because you showed me how. M." Evelyn looked up, surprised. "Mason." Alexander exhaled slowly. "He is gone. Do you think he means it?" "I do," he said, "because forgiveness changes more than punishment ever could." She folded the letter carefully. "Then let us keep it, a reminder of who we became." Weeks passed. The snow outside grew heavier, painting the city white again. Evelyn spent her mornings at the bookstore and her evenings at the foundation. Life had found a rhythm, ordinary, steady, real. But one evening, as she returned home, she found Alexander at the piano. The melody he played was new, slow, steady, hopeful. She leaned on the doorframe. "That is not the same song." He smiled without looking up. "No, it is something I wrote for us." What is it called? She asked. He pressed the final note, then turned toward her. 11 inches of forever? Her breath caught. Alexander, you once told me I gave you 11 inches of truth, he said softly. But you gave me something greater, 11 inches of peace. She walked toward him, eyes bright with tears. Play it again. He did. This time, she hummed along, her hand resting on his shoulder. The song filled the room like sunlight breaking through the last cloud. Later, they stood together on the balcony, the city glowing beneath them. Evelyn whispered, "Do you think love ever ends?" He shook his head. "No, it changes shape. It becomes the light we leave behind." She smiled, then promised me one thing. Anything. When people talk about us, I do not want them to remember the contract or the scandals. I want them to remember the garden, the children, the stories, the music. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. They will, because that is the part of us that never needed headlines. They stood in silence, watching snow fall like confetti from heaven. Inside, the piano waited, the music still warm in the air. In the months that followed, the Vale Foundation expanded across the country. The secret garden became a movement, a symbol of rebirth. The press no longer called her the billionaire's wife. They called her the woman who changed how the world sees love. And Alexander Vale, the man once defined by power and distance, became known simply as the man who kept his promise. On their anniversary, he gave her a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a ring not grand, not diamond, just a simple gold band engraved with words she recognized instantly. All 11 inches. Evelyn laughed through her tears. You remembered. I never forget anything that matters, he said. She took his hand. Then here is my promise, no more contracts, no more rules, just love, every day, in every form. He smiled. Deal. And as they kissed under the falling snow, New York hummed below, alive, awake, endless. Because in the city that never sleeps, two people had finally found the one thing that never needed rewriting. A love that survived every storm. A promise measured not in inches or years, but in forever. And that was how their story ended, not with a contract, but with a home, a melody, and a truth that no amount of time could ever erase.